And start.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to our Rodham Institute speaker series. We've got a great lineup today on such an important topic, which is financial health, which actually is probably, finances are probably one of the biggest reasons that people divorce. And certainly it is a reason for a lot of people to face hardships and a lot of stress, especially during these difficult times. Before I start, I just want to share some information about COVID. The COVID here in DC, we're beginning to see that hospitalizations are going down. Deaths have still not turned down quite yet. And the reason is that there's always a lag between infections and deaths. That's not to say that we still shouldn't be vigilant, because the best way of protecting ourselves is vaccines. And if you don't want to get a vaccine for whatever reason, please consider going to the Black Coalition Against COVID's website. We are members of that wonderful organization. There's a lot of great information on there, including an ad from the descendants of the Tuskegee experiment, who are very much supporting the vaccines. Please continue to wear your masks, the N95, as horribly uncomfortable as they may be. And please continue to physical distance and wash your hands. We just actually had the State of Black Health Summit with our partner, blackdoctor.org. If you go to the YouTube channel and just look up blackdoctor.org, we'll eventually have it on our channel as well. The first hour is dedicated to Omicron, and it's got a lot of great information about children. So, because I don't see that really being discussed so much in the media. The next one is about triple negative breast cancer. The third one is on heart health. The fourth one is on family health. And the fifth one is on mental health. So please, please, please go take a look. We are going to be having quarterly State of Black Health starting. That was our first inaugural one on MLK Day. If there are other topics, such as financial health, that you want to hear about, please either put it in the chat or send an email through the Rodham Institute website. All right, well, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guests this evening, who have generously given us their time and expertise to educate us. And so I'm just going to go in no particular order. And what I'd like each person to do, I don't believe in reading CVs. I prefer that people actually just introduce themselves, because they highlight what they think is important. So I think we'll start with you, Mr. Dr. Turner.
And here I was hoping it was ladies first. So Marvin Turner, I work in the federal industry as an executive. I happen to be a graduate of George Washington University's MBA program and serve on the board of the Board of Advisors for the School of Business. Background corporate finance, I've been kind of around the world, Russia, Ukraine, Ghana, New Zealand, Argentina, et cetera, doing finance in my life experience. Really happy to be here. Really happy for the Rodham Institute for putting this on. I think it's something that is definitely necessary, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the other speakers. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And Ms. Ashanti Carter, who's our program manager, is actually the person that had the idea for this and pulled this panel together. So thank you, Ms. Carter, as always. Ms. Hammonds, can you introduce yourself? Thank you, Mr. Turner.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me good?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. I am Michelle Hammonds. I'm the director of the Office of Financial Empowerment and Education at the Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking. I know it's a long title, but it's important work with what we do. DISB is also what is known as the acronym, but we're the district regulator for financial services, where we really want to provide a regulatory environment that protects consumers and attracts financial institutions to the District of Columbia. We also focus on empowering and educating residents here in the district, as well as providing access to small businesses for financing and access to capital. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a former banker. I've been talking about finances and how to manage your financial life since I came out of college, and I think it's a very important topic, and I'm happy to share with you all today.
Well, thank you. Last but not least, Ms. McMichael, welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for having me this evening. My name is Ashley McMichael. I am the founder of the Innovative Academy of Liberal Arts and Sciences, ALAS. ALAS is a two-generation workforce development organization that provides pathways to STEAM careers for students and parents east of the river in the District of Columbia. And one aspect of our program is really that financial piece, and how can we build a system that helps parents not only train, get income, but now that you have the income, what do you do with it so that you can be financially secure?
So why don't we start off with you, Ms. McMichael, because I want to kind of set the stage for how finances are actually, or lack thereof, impact families, communities, and what are you seeing are some of the biggest challenges? And maybe tell us also a little bit about, more specifically about your work in this area.
So some of the biggest challenges, I think, for families is really being able to be a part of a training environment where they are getting access to some type of stipend to do the work that they're trying to do. Because when you really look at the opposite, right, which is poverty, you see trauma, you see, violence, you see all these different things that affect your health and affect just every aspect, right? So when we bring them in, we really do like a stipend process where, they get a stipend, and then we connect them with different resources as to how they can build upon that stipend. In addition to that, how do you build your credit, like all these different things. Particularly for our families, what I've seen is sometimes, like, when we meet them, it never occurred to them that like they could do more, or no one's asked them like, what do you want to do? Or it's like we have this focus on children, which is great, right? But we do not have enough money to take care of everybody's child. So we need to make sure that the parents of those children is able to do so in a way that not only allows them to flourish, but the parents to flourish as well. So
I want to pick up on a point that you mentioned, because we are talking about health in a holistic way, physical, mental, and health and well-being, really. And when we look at the life expectancy difference around the DC, it's actually the highest in the country in terms of the disparity. If you live in Georgetown, you can actually expect to live 94 years, but in Anacostia, it's 66 and a half years. It's almost a 27-year gap. Most urban areas, it's more like 16 or 17 or 20 at the most. And of course, income disparities is a driver, education, all the things having to do with those factors that go into health outcomes, right? People tend to think of coming to the doctor as the main reason to be healthy, but really that only accounts for 20% of how long a person is going to live. So but you brought up a point about trauma. And I think it's particularly important now with COVID. If we just sort of review what I'll say the last 5 years, because we can't forget the previous administration. I don't know about you, but I felt so insulted and disrespected on a daily basis. And, the policies obviously that were put in place, which have led to trying to eliminate the Voting Rights Act, all of that. And then you have the Black Lives Matter and the continuation of the serial murders of Black people, right? Then you have COVID. And then, of course, things like gun violence are increasing. The gap that we're seeing that's widening in terms of kids of color in terms of education, all of these things. And so, finances, sometimes you're just trying to make it sort of from day to day, right? And so I can certainly understand and empathize with people not putting financial health as a priority. So what do you say to families with all these competing interests? How do you approach them?
Well, I mean, I have a unique advantage in that was these families at one point, right? So, I was on benefits and all different types of things. I grew up in the hood, like that's my life. So, for me, one of the things that helped me was I escaped through school. And so what I try to help them do is find, number one, a space to escape to, that can be, this outlet where education or whatever. But one of the things that I think that was unique for them versus me is when we talk about this trauma piece, some people have been depressed their entire life, right? So they don't know
Of course.
what not being depressed looks like, right? So essentially, really, you don't even know yourself in my mind, right? But when I went through my spell of depression, I immediately knew something was wrong because I had never experienced it before. So first for us, it's like clicking that light bulb, like, hey, you seem a little sad. Sometimes my parents would say, I've had parents tell me, oh, I sleep all day. And I say, that's not normal, right? And I mean, so it's this soft, loving way of approaching it. And then in terms of like that financial piece, I recognize for them, like I can't talk to you about finances as in my position about finances until I can help you make more money to be able to afford your cost of living. And, like it's like an oxymoron. Sometimes you take financial literacy classes and in the class, you're like, okay, well, I don't have the money to really, activate any of this now. I mean, ways that I think that are pretty cool to save is you can use apps and things like that, where it can like Acorns, where it gets your change. Those are ways that I think families who may not have as much money initially to save, those are ways that I think that they can save. But ultimately, like the first step is, finding out about a savings program, what resources are available in your community. DC is community rich. When it was Georgia, they're not giving you all that. And that's where I'm from, sorry. And so, we tell our parents about CAB, who has like different programs in terms of for children, savings for college, and like a savings match program. And so like we refer them to all of those different outlets, or whatever, whenever we see that something new is coming out, hey, you need to get this, or just different things like that, we really expose them to. And then it's like, oh, you have this stipend, so now you can use your stipend to get this or do this. So we really strategize with them and we help them forward think, but before we even like get there, we address the trauma. Like we start with trauma by connection to therapy, and then also providing mindset coaching for them, because it's just very important. And we've seen our parents like literally have conversations where they become aware of like why they did something, or they're like, be like, I'm not mad, and then be about to drag somebody out of somewhere sometimes, and you're like, okay, all right, so let's walk through it. And you walk through it with them, and they're like able and help them track it back to like really the root cause. Like you might be mad at dad, or you might be mad at mom from when you were younger. So when you yelling at me, you're not yelling at me, you yelling at your mama that you can't yell at. And so we're able to have these real conversations with them and help them walk through that process. So that's how we do that.
Well, that sounds so wonderful and so holistic, and really respecting the dignity and the, sort of the lived experience of the families that you're serving, and the multi-generational, if not multi-centennial trauma that being part of the African diaspora presents. This question is for either one of you, Ms. Daniels or Mr. I'm sorry, Ms. Hammonds or Mr. Turner. I don't know why Daniels is sticking in my mind. I'm sorry. Can you tell us sort of more on just statistics of how big an issue is financial health? What are some of the problems that you see and sort of the fallout of them?
So Michelle, do you want to go first?
Well, sure. Thank you. I would say, as I was listening to the previous conversation, one of the things that came to me was Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we see that also in the financial world. You can't deal with some of the financial pieces until you've dealt with the trauma. So I really applaud Ms. McMichael's efforts and what she's doing. Those are some of the things that individuals have to think about. And when you're dealing with your finances and you're thinking about financial health and your own health, all of these things kind of tie in. Your mental health is very much impacted by your ability to care for your family, to take care of that safety and security for someone, which all falls under those Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so when we think through that, how do we get people to transition from just existing to living and being bold in the choices that they make? And so when we look at some of the statistics, in the District of Columbia alone, we have a significant racial wealth gap. When we look at the numbers, I had to pull some data points to be prepared for this, but from the Urban Institute, they did a study in 2016 on the racial wealth gap in the District of Columbia specifically. There's a lot of studies that talk about this all throughout the country, but this was more localized. And so one of the things that they noted was the net worth of a white household is $284,000 on average versus a Black household, which in contrast is about $3,500. And so you have to think through, what are the causes of this? You know, is it about where the house is located? Is it because of the community? There's so many other triggers and factors that affect the household income and wealth. And so when we start to dig deeper, we start to see there's disparities in income, there are disparities in credit, and there are many disparities in how houses are valuated. And so when we start to see all these things, they begin to compound themselves and affect really how people are able to build their lives and start to build wealth. But there are some options that we can talk about later. I want to turn it over to Mr. Turner because he also worked at HUD, and I know this is something near and dear to him.
Yeah, so first let me just start by saying that the words I said, since you mentioned that organization, the words I say are my own. They don't reflect any other agency or anything. And during the conversation, as we discuss finance, this is not financial advice. You should probably seek a financial specialist for your own situation. Michelle is absolutely correct, particularly when she talked about housing. So I looked at a different Urban Institute report, but it said the same thing. So when you're looking at real estate, for instance, if you're a developer, you're developing based on what's called the area median income. And the area median income in the greater Washington area, which includes Northern Virginia, DC, Prince George's County, et cetera, is about roughly $130,000. But if you look at it, if you take that for Blacks versus white, the Black family of four, and that's for a family of four, it's about $44,000. Now, this was just in a report that I saw from housing and nonprofit developers. They were putting together based on information on the Urban Institute. And so it's not just in DC though, and DC has an exaggerated gap, but it's about, if you take I was reading somewhere recently that if you take the top 400 billionaires in the country, you pretty much have the same amount of wealth as the entire Black community. Now think of that. That's something. If you take even if you take the top percentage of Black wealth versus white wealth, there's a disparity there. Michelle also talked about, she mentioned income inequality, and she mentioned credit inequality, but there's also wealth inequality. And a lot of times folks, when we're talking about wealth, inequality, wealth differences and income differences, they feed in, right? So Michelle is absolutely correct. If you look at a vicious circle, if you don't have the right amount of income, it's hard to create wealth. If you don't have the right amount of wealth, it's hard to get credit. If you don't have the right amount of credit, it's hard to get a house. If you don't have the right amount of house, it's hard to get a neighborhood. I'll go back to a speech Malcolm X said: if you're If you're poor, you live in a poor neighborhood, you get from there you get a poor school. You have a poor school. Poor school gets you a poor teacher. Poor teacher gives you poor wages. Poor wages gives you, and I'm paraphrasing a lot because I don't necessarily remember word for word anything, but I remember what the thought is, and he called it a vicious cycle, right? A vicious cycle that was discussed back in the 60s continues to this day. Now you can imagine if we talk about disparities. If I'm racing you and let's say I'm doing a 400 meter dash, and if you know me, I don't run 10 feet, but if I was doing a 400 meter dash and I gave you a 200 meter head start, the track is the same. It's not the track. It's the amount of distance that you have to cover. So if I look at disparities based on, I'm not even going to go back to slavery. I'm not even going to go back to Jim Crow. I'm just going to go back to now, right? In the recent history. When I was born, when I was born, there were 48 stars in the flag. So that just gives you an idea of my age, but there are different places.
It must be before 1959 because that was the last date, right? And that was my birth year. That's why I know that.
Yeah. So if you look at it, it is a, up until 64, at 64, you could go places, you couldn't eat places, right? And redlining under the Federal Housing Administration, you could go to a place and up until 68, and your family and another family who doesn't look like me, they might get the opportunity and someone else does not. So post-Reconstruction opportunities, whether you had red line of houses, or whether you had opportunities for jobs, whether you had opportunities for didn't have the opportunities for education, et cetera. All of those things really led to disparities. And I say that because it is so important for people like Ms. McMichael and Ms. Hammonds, what they do to provide leadership across, leadership and education across all areas. And the folks I typically work with are, they may have capital, but I came from an area like you talk about Ms. McMichael, I came from Philadelphia. And DC doesn't have woods like Philadelphia. Just trust me on that. Not in the 60s anyway. All right.
So I saw a question that I'm going to come back to, but you said that it's different from slavery and Jim Crow, but it's a caste system. I mean, back in, I want to say 2019, Norman Lear, the creator of All in the Family and a number of these shows, he has a documentary series called America Divided. And he and an African-American friend of his went separately to rent a unit. And he got the unit, but not his friend. And just another thing to just talk about how embedded the caste system is here is that if you look at Scandinavian countries versus us, in Scandinavian countries, if your parent is a doctor, that doesn't necessarily correlate with whether you're going to be a doctor. You could be a carpenter, you could be anything else. There's no one-on-one correlation. But in the United States, whatever your parent does, it is highly likely that that's what you're going to do. Your life expectancy, wealth, and sort of all of that. And just to give you another statistic, in Ward 8, I want to say the average family income is 38,000, as opposed to now going on 300,000 in Ward 3 where I live. So, and then I want to also speak about sort of the generational wealth and how it's being lost. So Ward 7 is actually a good example of that because Ward 7 is more heterogeneous. There are actually a lot of homeowners there, employees of the federal government. But as they either pass on or, move away or whatever, their kids or even grandkids are selling those houses at really cheap prices, because as the gentrification is coming through, I mean, it seems very attractive to get cash, right? A quick cash for a smaller amount than, waiting for the larger cash or negotiating or whatever. So I guess, there are so many questions that I have, because the problems are so big and really so embedded in the system. They are woven into the fabric of this society. We do live in DC, which I think, which I know has a lot more resources than other places. There's no question. The challenge is that people don't know how to navigate those resources. So one of the questions that was in the chat that I just want to make sure that we're making sure to address, and of course I can't see, in what ways can we encourage and reintroduce the concept of cycling the Black dollar? Is it at a neighborhood or community? I'm sorry, I just got new glasses, new prescriptions, and I cannot see with these, so forgive me. Oh, Mr. You're muted. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Hannah.
I wanted to kind of talk about that concept of what you said, and then kind of bring it back to that question. When we're talking about building generational wealth, and you really hit on a point, if someone in the caste system, and they may be determined by their income and what they've been exposed to. So many times I think what impacts communities of color is exposure. Are you exposed, and do you have these conversations about generational wealth? If your parents never had money, how are they going to talk to their children about money, and how is the grandparent going to talk about money? It's not a conversation that you have. We've made the conversation of money so taboo. And so the first thing is really to start the conversation. The next thing is talking to young people and talking to families about the importance of owning assets. Ownership is what causes people to start to build wealth. In these situations where people are pretty much short selling themselves on these properties because they rather focus on the here and now versus what in the future may come, that still comes back to that family trauma, those family things that you're dealing with. And so you can only really deal with and think about what's happening now in the present, as opposed to that long-term planning. And so that's where we really have to think about the generational wealth and how we imparting information to our communities, from youth to seniors, and making sure they have these conversations. Before I was in this particular role, I used to sell life insurance, and the hardest conversation was to talk to a community of color about buying life insurance. In my own family, at least, that happened as well, where, I had a great aunt who said, well, I don't care what happens when I die because I'm dead. Y'all figure it out, and that'll be the case. So our family lost a significant amount of acreage of land in the country because that was not a conversation that was had, versus when my own grandmother passed, our family went through estate planning. We made sure that we protected the assets of the family. And so you can see that dynamic, but unless we have these conversations and make people feel comfortable asking questions, then that's how we start to change the paradigm. Many times people have a level of shame for not knowing about finances, but I have a degree in finance, and I learn about finances on a regular basis, something new on a regular basis. So those are one of the things that we need to do. Having conversations like the one today, bringing this information to the community is going to be very important. And then putting the money back in the community is really key. So as you start to have more and more Black businesses, as we've lost the number of Black businesses, we have to support those businesses and making sure that our dollars are going there. Mm-hmm. And so Those are just some of the key points that I just wanted to make, and I'll turn it over to any of the other panelists to add.
Yeah.
Let me, if I could, jump in on this one. Michelle said it absolutely correctly. One of the things that I deal with are the other end of the income scale. Folks that have what are called family offices, right? And those are folks that are much wealthier than myself. They're ultra high net worth individuals and high net worth individuals. And having those conversations, one of the things that they, one of the, a friend of mine who's at the Rockefeller family office shared with me, there's something that they do with their families. Now, the only reason I'm talking about this is because it's free, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have these meetings, right? When you have the annual cookout, they have these meetings. They talk about family governance issues. They talk about what our family values or our family vision is, et cetera. And while that's for the ultra high net worth folks, that's something we could do today, right? And it doesn't cost anything to have those sorts of conversations about what is it as a family we believe in, what is it as a what do we want to tell our children, et cetera. And one of the things that we mentioned about generational wealth is we say that word, but the reality is that most folks that say it, and I'm not saying this crowd because this is a smart crowd, but most folks that say it have no idea what it really is, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's just two words, might as well be the boogeyman. Generational wealth is being able to share the wealth that you have for generations after you. So if you're going to share that wealth for generations after you, want to make certain that your children, your grandchildren, your grandparents also have a shared vision and shared values of what you want to have. Now, at the scale that I grew up in, obviously that's not something, I couldn't have a fund and all of that. But at a middle market stage, mid level, you can have a DAF with donor advised fund, a foundation that starts those sorts of things. You can, if I'm wealthy, I'll go to a money manager. If I'm at a level that's 20, 40,000, I can get my money managed. It's called an ETF, right? Electronic trader fund. You can buy a broad basket of stocks. And you have the same level of management that a wealthier person has. So some of the things that we do are barriers, and they're all barriers. But whether or not we're going to bounce over those barriers or not, look at the free things that we do. Mm-hmm. That we just do the conversations. What I was talking about managing money when I started in that area, you had to actually go to the library and get a value line, right? You had to do all of those things. Now you just go to www.whatever, and get a lot of free information. It's just up to you to sift through it, just like gold.
Thank you. Ms. McMichael, I'd like to come to you because I'd like to sort of find out what are sort of the financial literacy that you teach. What are sort of the key components of that?
So we contract with somebody to teach the financial literacy, Lasting Change LLC. And so she does, we do on and off. So it's a topic, and then the next week is coaching. I like everything to be action oriented. Sometimes when you offer these classes, you sit in the class, and if you don't do it right then and there, you never do it. And so they go over things like credit, right? They actually, like, it's an assignment, pull your credit report,
Oh, wow.
You see thing on there that's inaccurate. Okay, now Miss, Linda is going to go through those things with you and help you dispute what needs to be disputed, or, if you don't have any credit. So now what do we need to look at? Maybe you can get a secure credit card, or maybe you can do a self-lender account, which is an app that allows you to save money, but build your credit at the same time. They go through basic budgeting. So that is a skill that I didn't realize was such a deficit for some of my parents. Like, I just didn't imagine, because I've never really been like a super budgeter. But I just write out like what I have to pay, and but one of my parents was like, no, I'm really having trouble with this, and I'm having issues additionally with the bank. So we talk about banking and like, how to avoid overdraft fees and, things like that. And then we go on to like long-term investing and things like that. I think those are like the main: budgeting, credit, long-term investing, helping them figure out how much they need to live. That's another thing that people haven't like figured out. Like, okay, like you want this job for whatever reason, right? Because it's just a job, but is that job going to bring you to a place of sustainability? We talk about life insurance and things like that, and home ownership, all of those different things. And then there's, for me, we try to get a speaker to talk about, investing, because when you look at the racial wealth gap and you look at like the causes, one of the things that I found that was very interesting is that most of the wealth accumulated in white communities was accumulated from the stock market and business. And so we also have to be careful about saying, oh, just start a business, because your business needs to be able to serve multiple demographics, right? So if you start a business and it's only for the Black community, and guess what? You're still pulling money out of your community's pocket. You know what I mean? So you have to, but when you think about Target or, different brands, you go there and guess what? They get everybody's money, right? So creating a business that can benefit not just your community, but everybody, right? And then taking some of those proceeds, and maybe you don't want to be volunteering, but you can, pay it back into the community. So I harp on my students a lot. So like when I tell them like, y'all get your certifications, y'all go be in cybersecurity, don't forget about your community. Like that's always like my rant, like don't forget like where you come from. And so those are some of the things that we kind of go through.
So let me ask you, Ms. McMichael, are credit cards a real issue for people? Because credit cards, I get it that, the immediacy of getting something, and obviously there's a self-soothing aspect of it, whether it's feeling good about being able to provide presents for children during the holidays, or just feeling good when you shop for something, just like for some of us it's eating, and that's how we do the self-soothing, or drinking or smoking or any number of things. But how big of a problem, or an issue rather, is it for the families that you talk with and you serve, credit card and credit card debt?
So, we target, families, in Ward 7, Ward 8, Ward 5, things like that, though, that demographic of families. And what I noticed though is that families who actually, maybe they have made it to like that middle class range, those are the families that tend to have issues with like actual credit. A lot of the times, the individuals who are like, maybe in public housing, or a lot of them don't even have credit cards. From what I'm seeing. And so that's not even like really an option for them.
It's a non-issue.
And so what their issue is more of building credit, right? And maybe getting something off their credit that a family member or someone else might have put on their credit, things like that. And I'm not saying that because I haven't met everybody in the city, right?
Of course.
But so far, the people that I've seen that have credit issues are, people that went to college, but no one told them like, I have one of my colleagues, like she finished paying off her credit cards, but she said like when she got the credit card, she just thought she could spend it. She just thought she had, like she didn't know she had to pay it back, so they're that financial education about, these credit cards, or, your parents are like, just pay your bills. But there's more to it than that.
Of course. There's a question also about how do you teach children sort of at a very basic level how to invest? What is the manner that you do that?
So with our children, so this summer we're actually doing like kind of like a finance camp for the kids, where they go through a similar process for that the parents go through, but it's like a fun thing. But one of the things that we're going to do at the end for our kids, but any parent can do, is buy your kid a stock, right? So your kid likes, I don't know, Disney or, Nike or whatever it is your kid likes, right? Buy them the actual, not just like purchase the stock, but buy them the actual certificate, right? And so that they can put it on the wall or something like that. And let them know like this is this much right now, and it's going to grow in value. And then, over time, you'll notice they'll start to get like intrigued about that information. So, and one of the kids, I don't know, so they're different. They like that kind of stuff. So sometimes you can just do stuff around them. So I was checking charts one time when I was at the after school program with one of our students, and he was like, "What is that?" And so I started explaining to him, what it was. And he was like, and so he's been bothering me about this like, well, when are we going to do, the finance piece and learn about the stock market and stuff like that. So really, they're really interested in the information. And so we've even facilitated partnerships where they can fake invest. So it's like fake money, but things like that where they can play like stock games. Yeah. So it's like games and you make it competitive. Like those are simple ways that you can do.
Yeah.
Things like that.
I have to share, thank you. I mean, I think that these creative ways, I too, as a medical educator, with students and residents, you try not to do the lectures. They call it death by PowerPoint because it just is not helpful. But Bishop Staples from Temple of Praise, over the years, his congregation he's been very accepting of people of, various backgrounds. And one of the people, I guess there were a lot of people that were involved in gangs that would come and attend his church. And one of them ended up going into the stock market and did very well. I mean, he's like on Wall Street now. And I'm thinking, intelligence, right, is not parsed out by ward or neighborhood or certainly ethnicity or whatever artificial construct is put up. I mean, he had the same skills to run one kind of business, which was maladaptive for the community, versus another one. I thought that was, I don't know why I thought of that as an interesting anecdote. So yeah, being creative and also using life experience that kids can relate to. So I have a couple more questions, and my goodness, this time is really flying by, and this is open to anybody. What roles, and you notice that Ms. Ashanti sent it to me by text because I can't see it on the chat. What roles can we ask community banks to play in closing the financial gap?
Yeah, Michelle, do you want to take that since you're at DISB, or would you? I just started. I'll start and can share to you. So community banks, as well as CDFIs, credit unions, all of those things. So if you look at bank financial institutions and debt depository institutions, you have at the large scales, you have what are called the money center banks. Think of a Bank of America. You think of I'll just say Bank of America for now. At the local areas, you have community banks that serve the community development financial institutions, credit unions, et cetera. All of those have a role to play in a community. Credit unions tend to be more membership organizations, and the membership, I've served on the board of two credit unions historically, and they really exist for the members. So the members actually own them. And they have the same sort of investments in many cases that, not in all cases, but in many cases that the larger money center banks have. But they also have a charter of helping the community, and I think that's likely the more important thing in this discussion. Want to chime in from there and kind of rescue me a little bit?
Sure, no problem. There are a number of community banks, and we like to promote from the FDIC in our partnership and in the Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking, minority-owned financial institutions. In the District of Columbia, we have one of the oldest, it's Industrial Bank, but we also have a number of community development financial institutions and nonprofit, word just escaped me. But we have a number of financial institutions that want to provide resources to the community. And these were the lifeline and the lifeblood for businesses, many Black businesses, to be able to access capital. And those are the businesses that are doing the work. when I look at the businesses that are surviving, you look at some of our historical businesses, such as Ben's Chili Bowl or Lee's. They worked specifically and banked with Industrial Bank. And so that was one of the examples of keeping that Black dollar in the community, looking at being able to provide those resources to those businesses. And so if we continue down that path, and we saw how these community banks were able to really provide access to capital to many businesses that may have been overlooked by mainstream banking, that is a way to start to have that engagement with those community banks. I just also want to note, kind of back to what Ms. McMichael was saying, as we start thinking about building wealth in the community, I always say that there are 3 pillars of wealth. It's really owning real estate, owning investments in the market, and a successful entrepreneurship business. And so those are ways for individuals and families to start to build wealth. And so if we focus on some of these concepts, really, if you notice, one of the main words that I mentioned was ownership. If we start to focus on ownership of different things, it's not just having material items, but do we have assets that are creating income for us? And that's where we start to see the differentiation. When we're looking at people that are investing in the market, as you know, and our young people that are interested in it, it's a great way for people to start to build wealth and have some continuation in that process. And so it's a lot about being diligent, getting the information out there, and making sure that people can tangibly do these things when they're taking a financial literacy class that is tangible to them at that time in their life. So I really do a lot of work myself in the district to connect with workforce development programs where people are getting money, when they're getting paid. That's the most practical time to have these type of conversations so that you can understand, okay, what does your budget look like? How are you going to start to take care of your family? What are your top priorities? And how do you prioritize your spending and make yourself part of that equation? One of the things I always tell people is pay yourself first. And so you have to understand what that means and how that impacts your budget.
So, you've brought up so many wonderful resources. And one of the things that I personally find sort of frustrating, and I know when, I'm dealing with other people and I'm trying to point them in the right direction, I feel like there's not a one-stop shop. I'm not aware of course, and this is not my area, but is there a one-stop shop that people can go to and say, okay, I'm interested in business, or I'm interested in all the different things that you've just spoken about, Ms. Hammonds, to me? I mean, not everybody has digital access, but let's say that they do. Is there a place where they can find out for the District of Columbia where those resources are and how to access them? Because I find that's one of the biggest barriers for other services.
Well, I will say it's not a shameless plug, but it is what I do. So you can go to our website, disb.dc.gov. We connect you to many resources that are available here in the District of Columbia. And if we're going to talk about resources, we have a whole segment on our website that talks about financial empowerment. And I'm very focused on making sure we get this information to the community and we start to build resources that are very thoughtful in what the community needs. Just some of the resources that are available to you, like the topic of conversation today, we have an online financial tool called Financially Fit DC, and that can be easily accessed by individuals. Many times when you see learning tools, it's a data dump, and we took a different approach to this online tool where we are allowing people to share what is a priority to them. We ask a few questions and we connect individuals to those resources here in the District of Columbia. And so while it may not be 100%, we probably have 80, 85, 90% of all of the resources that are available here in the district to connect you to those resources. So that's a good tool. We also have another program called Financial Navigators for when people are going through some financial difficulty, especially as it related to COVID-19. we created a program in partnership with United Planning Organization, UPO, and Cities for Financial Empowerment to help people triage those financial concerns. So there's a lot of work that's happening in DC to help people with their financial matters. And we're doing more and more to try to make sure it's easy for folks to access that information. So that's very much part of the mission of my agency and my office specifically.
So please count the Rodham Institute as somebody that's going to promote your work. But I just had a thought, and maybe we can talk offline or after this, that I think it would be helpful if you came and talk to clinicians or people in the healthcare system, because these issues come up, and we don't know how to point people in the right direction. But sort of as we close, a couple of thoughts that I have. I still struggle with this. I don't like to talk about money, and I don't like to think about money. And it's actually something that I don't know, on a cultural level, and I'm not talking about Egyptian culture, I'm talking about family culture. It's like, it's just not something. I mean, we're very proud at being economical and frugal and all that. My parents were they're now retired university professors, but not a lot of money. So is that something, Ms. McMichael, that you find is an issue, that part of the reluctance to have some of these conversations is just the individual or family relationships people have about money, and sort of, I don't know exactly what I'm asking, but
for me, no.
Okay, all right.
I love talking
Forget
about money, but no. But I think that you can correct me if I'm wrong. What you may be getting at here is one of the things I see with my parents, like they might miss out on an opportunity to invest their money to do something, like to make some extra money, but then maybe like they'll buy like a $200 pair of shoes or something like that. And so I think it's more of the fact that, like, when investing, you might not necessarily see your money the same day. If I buy a pair of shoes, I'm wearing them all the time. I have it. I have something tangible that I've spent my money on, right? And I think that there's a couple different reasons, right? First off, we've been exploited so much in our community as it comes, when it comes to money. I mean, we're in a real life like Monopoly game, and like we weren't allowed to play for 400 years, right? And then we finally did play, they burnt our board. So, there's that, right? So people, when they get the money, sometimes it's just really like stringent. Like, I will personally tell you one of my situations where I don't care though. I don't care. I ask, right? So I'm getting married, right? And so for us, like my grandfather is an amazing individual, right? Until it comes to money, like it gets really weird. And I'm like, you're getting older, like, why are you so, like, what are you going to do with it? And so it's really like thinking through it's all attached to trauma in my mind, or some specific, relationship that you have with money. So for me, I sometimes like freely give money away, not like just randomly, but like if I see somebody in need, like I will help them, right? Because I know what it's been like to not have help.
Can I just jump in with that? I'm just going to interject. African Americans are the most generous in terms of charitable giving, percentage-wise to their income, and also the biggest readers in the country. Just two facts.
Oh, sorry, and so I'll just add to your fact. What I also found out is, that we also are the least likely to be subject to the bystander effect. So if something is happening to someone, we are like the first ones to stand up and help. But yeah, so money is always a funny thing, though, I think, in our community, when it comes to sharing. And so we just have to get that trust back, I think, and figure out what our relationship to money is. And that money is a tool, it's not something made to be harbored, and it's not something to be, it's not our Lord, right? So there's like, there needs to be balance there. And so sometimes I think our relationships with our parents or grandparents.
Of course. And so I know that Mr. Turner, you have to leave. Any last parting words before you hop on to the next webinar?
I just wanted to thank you for your leadership and the Adam Institute's leadership in putting this panel together. Michelle said it earlier, you study finance all your life, but you learn something new every day on it, and you learn through the discussion. So I really, really appreciate you.
Oh, well, we appreciate you and your time and your expertise. Like I say, this hour has kind of flown by, and obviously I think there's a hunger to get even more information out there, and we will continue to really push this information and knowledge and shine the light on each of you and the great work that you're doing. So thank you, Mr. Turner.
Thank you. And
Take care. Be well. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. All right, for the two ladies that are left, we're going to just kind of come to you. Any closing thoughts? And I guess we'll start with Ms. Hammonds.
Thank you so much for that. This has been a rich conversation, and there's been some interesting questions in the chat. So I hope that we've kind of hit all of the targets there. I would say, as people are thinking about their finances, it has been for many times very taboo to have these conversations. And so a lot of that is cultural. A lot of that sometimes is shame because you don't know what you don't know. And so I'm here to say, talking about money is fine. It's a very important thing. Money is what determines how you can achieve some of the goals that you want to achieve in your life. And I do think of money as a tool. And so in order to know how to use the tool, you have to read up on it and understand it, and not be afraid to ask questions and seek guidance from a financial professional, from individuals that know about money, and sometimes even from your family, because sometimes they'll give you examples of what not to do, and you might want to think about how to do something differently. So those are some of the things to think about. Look, make sure that you access these resources that are available to you, but then I will always end with this. When you are trying to save for your future, save with a goal in mind. Make that savings automatic, whatever it is, if it's from your retirement account and your 401k up into your savings account and your emergency fund, make that automatic. Have a plan for your money, because if you don't have a plan for your money, it's going to go out the door and you won't know what happened to it. And then last but not least, please enjoy the journey. And so as we enjoy our life, money can be a very stressful conversation and topic for many people. But if you start to build that foundation and get that information, it doesn't have to be. And it's accessible. Building wealth is accessible to everyone.
Thank you. And finally, last but not least, Ms. McMichael, any parting words of wisdom?
Well, Michelle gave you guys a mouthful, pretty much all you need. All I will say is learn about investing. It's too many free apps, too many, we're learning, and Black people in general are moving to the market and we're learning about it. So learn about it. I'm not a financial, guru or anything like that. But there's different things you can invest in. Look into investing in watches, owning a watch, different things like that. NFTs, metaverse, all of that. Y'all need to get into it. And build your wealth, so you can live however it is that you want to live.
Well, I figured out what I was trying to articulate and didn't do very well. And that is, there is shame associated with money because of the people that are super wealthy and what they do with it. And so sometimes that's what I meant, is like, if you accrue a lot of wealth, there's negativity involved with that. But you're right, it is all about the context, about thinking about it as a tool and not a noose if you don't have it, or even if you do have it, and to have those open conversations with your loved ones and think about what wealth means to each of you. So I'd like to thank you, Ms. McMichael and Ms. Hammonds. This was excellent. We've gotten such wonderful responses and, kudos in the chat. I don't know if you've had a chance to go through them, but please come back anytime. We'd love to have you. And we're definitely going to invite you back especially to educate our children but also to educate anybody that's outward facing and deals with, people in whatever settings, because these are issues that people face. And last but not least, I'd like to thank Ms. Ashanti Carter, who put this wonderful panel, invited these wonderful panelists here, and thought about the topic of financial fitness and financial health. And don't forget to visit Financially Fit DC. Is that one of them? Okay, see, I listened. And we're just so happy to have you all. And thank you for your commitment to service and to the health and well-being of DC. So with that, everybody, I hope that you have a great rest of your evening, and please take care, please stay safe, and winter's been long, but we will get through it, I promise. Take care. Bye-bye.